The courtroom was unusually quiet that morning. Even the usual hum of whispers died the moment Judge Judy walked through those wooden double doors. The air felt thick, almost heavy, as if everyone inside already knew they were about to witness something unforgettable. What no one knew, however, was that this case would make national headlines within hours. This wasn't a lawsuit over money or property. This was a case where life itself had been stolen and somehow returned. A victim who survived death. And a defendant who believed his father's money could buy mercy. Lena Ortiz sat at the plaintiff's table, her face illuminated by the sharp morning light cutting through the blinds. A faint scar traced down the left side of her cheek, a permanent reminder of the night she was never supposed to survive. She sat upright, chin steady, a quiet defiance in her eyes. Behind her, rows of spectators, reporters, advocates, even strangers, leaned forward, sensing that this trial wasn't about one woman versus one man. It was about privilege versus pain. Across the aisle, Derek Vance adjusted his cufflinks, the kind that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His posture was casual, arrogant even. He wasn't sitting in fear, he was sitting in control. The son of a senator, the heir to a business empire, and the man accused of an assault that nearly ended Lena's life. Yet, here he was, smirking faintly, ready to offer a deal, as if justice were just another item he could purchase. The irony wasn't lost on Judge Judy. For decades, she'd seen every kind of liar walk into her courtroom, from small-time fraudsters to full-blown manipulators, but something about Derek's confidence made her blood run cold. There was something rehearsed about him. The way he smiled at the cameras, the way he nodded politely to his lawyer, even the way he avoided looking at Lena, it was all too controlled, too polished. But the real tension came from what no one else in that room knew. Judge Judy already had something, a document, a piece of footage, a whisper of truth, that could change everything. It was tucked inside the beige folder on her bench, marked only with a red tab. And though the cameras couldn't see it, Judy's hand rested on that folder like a loaded weapon. She looked at Lena, then at Derek. Two stories. Two versions of the same night. One soaked in fear, the other drenched in privilege. Somewhere between them, the truth was waiting, and Judy intended to drag it out, kicking and screaming if she had to. Lena's lawyer began the opening statement, her voice trembling only slightly as she recounted the night of the attack. My client was working her final shift before moving to nursing school. She had just stepped outside the bar when the defendant. Objection, Derek's attorney interrupted smoothly. We're not here to retry what the police already handled. My client has accepted responsibility and is seeking a fair plea agreement. The word plea sliced through the silence like a knife. Even the court reporter looked up from her machine. A plea? For what? For nearly taking a life? For the trauma that haunted Lena's sleep every night? For the fear that still made her flinch at sudden footsteps behind her? Judge Judy didn't blink. Her expression remained carved from stone, but the spark behind her eyes was unmistakable. She let the attorney continue, not out of patience but precision. She wanted every arrogant word on record. As Derek's lawyer spoke about remorse and mental strain, Derek sat perfectly composed, his fingers interlocked, the faintest smirk on his lips. He glanced at Lena once, not with regret, but with the smugness of someone who believed the ending was already written in his favor. But Judy noticed everything. The smirk, the confidence, the entitlement that came from a lifetime of escaping accountability. And quietly behind her bench she turned that beige folder slightly, revealing a corner of the paper inside, one that bore a police seal and the words confidential witness report. No one else noticed. Not yet. The cameras zoomed in slightly as Judy leaned forward, her voice calm but laced with the authority that had made her America's most feared judge. Mr. Vance, she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. You don't negotiate with me, young man. You answer to me. For a fraction of a second, Derek's composure faltered. His lips parted, eyes narrowing just slightly. He didn't like surprises, especially not from someone who clearly wasn't intimidated by his father's name or his tailored suit. And for the first time since he walked into that courtroom, he realized this might not go his way. The camera lingered on Judy's expression, calm, calculating, unbothered, as the audience collectively held its breath. Something was coming. Something Derek didn't see yet. And the world watching would soon learn that in Judge Judy's courtroom, the truth doesn't bargain. And before we go deeper into this case, tell me in the comments, should Judge Judy even consider a plea deal for someone like this? Because if you already know your answer is no, hit subscribe right now. This case is about to explode. 6 months before the quiet tension of that courtroom, the world of Lena Ortiz looked entirely different. She was 27, living in a small apartment above a flower shop, juggling 2 jobs and saving every spare dollar for nursing school. She wasn't rich, famous, or powerful, but she was steady, kind, and known to everyone in her neighborhood as the girl who never stopped smiling, even when life gave her every reason to. She waited tables at a downtown restaurant called the Copper Lantern, a warm place filled with laughter and the smell of roasted coffee beans. The regulars loved her. They tipped her well, not out of pity but respect. She didn't know then that one of those regulars would nearly destroy her life. Derek Vance had first appeared at the restaurant in a navy suit and a grin that never quite reached his eyes. He was the kind of customer every waitress learned to be polite to but cautious around. Charming on the surface, impatient underneath. He was the son of Senator Howard Vance, a man who had shaken hands with presidents and boasted about raising leaders. Derek carried that same confidence, the kind that came from a lifetime of privilege and immunity. He'd grown up being told the world was his, and for the most part it had been. At first, his attention seemed harmless. A compliment here, a joke there, generous tips that made the other waitresses envious. But Lena could feel it, that edge, that sense of entitlement behind his smile. The way he leaned too close when she poured his coffee. The way his eyes lingered when she walked away. She'd learned to brush it off, to stay professional, to survive without confrontation. Until the night everything changed. It was a Friday evening, the kind of shift that made time blur together. The restaurant was full, jazz music playing faintly from the speakers, rain hammering the windows. Lena was closing her section when Derek walked in, visibly drunk, his tie loose, laughter booming. He wasn't alone. 2 friends followed, loud and careless. They took a table in her section and immediately began teasing her, pretending to flirt. Lena smiled politely and kept her distance. But Derek wasn't there to eat. He was there to prove something. When she brought the check, he leaned closer. "You know, I've been waiting for you to take me seriously," he slurred. She gently told him to have a good night and turned to leave. That's when the smile vanished from his face. His hand shot out, catching her wrist. His voice dropped low. "You think you're better than me?" She pulled free and stepped back, heart pounding. The manager rushed over, asking Derek and his friends to leave. They did, eventually. But not quietly. He walked out laughing, tossing a few bills on the table like an insult. That should have been the end of it. But later that night, as Lena locked up and stepped into the dim alley behind the restaurant, she heard footsteps. Heavy. Quick. Too close. She turned, and that's when it happened. The story she told in court would never capture the chaos of those next 60 seconds. The flash of silver, the sound of glass breaking, her scream echoing off wet brick. Somewhere in that blur, a bottle shattered, cutting her cheek open. Her vision swam, she fell against the wall. The only thing she remembered clearly was a laugh. Cruel, breathless, familiar. And then darkness. When she woke up in the hospital, the doctor told her she was lucky. 17 stitches. A mild concussion. A survivor. But luck felt like a cruel word. Her face was different. Her reflection was a stranger. And when she told the police who had attacked her, they hesitated, because the man she named wasn't just anyone. He was a senator's son. Weeks turned into months. The media called it an unfortunate altercation. Derek's father called it an overreaction. Lawyers called it negotiable. But Lena never called it anything except what it was, an attack. She lost her job. Customers stopped coming to the restaurant after the story broke. But through all of it she refused to back down. When the DA offered a settlement, she said no. When Derek's lawyer offered hush money, she said no. When the threats started coming, anonymous calls, late-night letters, she still said no. And now, 6 months later, she sat in that courtroom, clutching her statement folder so tightly her knuckles turned white. Inside it were the photos, the medical records, the police notes, every piece of evidence she'd gathered when everyone else told her to move on. Judge Judy watched her closely, recognizing that kind of strength. It was the same quiet fire she'd seen in survivors before, the kind that turns pain into purpose. Across the aisle, Derek's face remained calm, confident, untouchable. But under that veneer, a storm was waiting. He had no idea that the evidence against him was about to go far deeper than he thought. Because somewhere out there, a hidden truth still waited. Something caught on camera that Derek believed had been erased forever. Judge Judy already had a copy. And as Lena lifted her eyes from that folder, meeting Judy's gaze, she didn't know it yet, but the next few hours would decide not just her future, but how far justice could stretch when money tried to suffocate it. If you've ever rooted for someone who refused to stay silent, tap that like button right now. Because this woman's courage deserves it, and what's about to surface next will leave you speechless. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with low whispers. The case had already gained traction in the local news, and by now, every seat in the audience was taken. Reporters filled the back row, notebooks poised, cameras waiting for something, anything, that might go viral. Then the door opened, and Derek Vance walked in like a man arriving at an awards ceremony. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored to perfection. A silk tie, navy with silver stripes, shimmered under the courtroom lights. His shoes clicked softly against the tile floor, each step measured, confident, deliberate. This wasn't the entrance of a man haunted by guilt. This was the performance of someone who believed the world still revolved around him. He flashed a polite smile to the bailiff, nodded toward the spectators, even gave a short wave to the press. To him this wasn't a trial. It was theater. When he sat down at the defense table, his lawyer, an expensive man with a calm voice and a smile that never faded, leaned in and whispered something that made Derek chuckle. The audacity of that moment made several jurors shift uncomfortably. Lena didn't look at him, she couldn't. She focused on the papers in her lap, trying to steady her breathing. Judge Judy entered and took her seat. The murmur died instantly. She adjusted her glasses, looked briefly at both parties and said, "Let's begin." Derek's attorney rose with the confidence of someone used to winning. His tone was calm, practiced, dripping with fake empathy. "Your Honor, what happened that night was a misunderstanding. My client has accepted full responsibility for his actions and has already expressed sincere remorse. He was under extreme emotional distress, a tragic combination of alcohol, heartbreak, and confusion. What occurred was never intentional." He paused, letting the words, "never intentional," hang in the air like perfume that was meant to mask something foul. Lena's fingers tightened around her pen, knuckles white. Across the room, Derek's expression softened into what he imagined remorse might look like. His eyes lowered. His lips pressed together. A calculated sigh escaped him. He dabbed his face with a neatly folded handkerchief, forcing a tremor into his voice. "I never meant to hurt her," he said, each word dripping with artificial pain. "I was angry, yes, but I didn't mean for it to go that far. I've had nightmares about that night. I wish I could take it back." The audience shifted, unsure whether to believe him. To the untrained eye, Derek might have seemed sincere. But Judge Judy's eyes had seen thousands of liars before him. She studied every twitch, every pause, every rehearsed inflection. His tears were too well-timed. His tone too perfect. And his lawyer's subtle nods of approval gave away that this was not a confession, it was choreography. Judy leaned back slightly, silent. The pause stretched long enough for everyone to feel it. Then, in that cutting tone that had silenced entire courtrooms for decades, she spoke. "You didn't mean to hurt her?" Derek looked up, startled by the sudden edge in her voice. "You nearly ended her life," Judy continued, her eyes sharp, her words measured. "You didn't stumble. You didn't fall. You chose to follow her out that door. You chose to lift your hand. And now you want to sit in my courtroom and call that a misunderstanding?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Even Derek's lawyer looked uneasy. Derek straightened his tie, trying to reclaim his confidence. "Your Honor, I've already apologized to Miss Ortiz. I've offered—" "You've offered money?" Judy interrupted, her voice like steel. "You think remorse can be wired through a bank transfer?" Her words cut the air clean in half. Derek swallowed, his jaw tightening, the charm draining from his face. Still, beneath the surface, his confidence simmered. He believed his father's name would protect him. He believed influence could smooth everything out just as it always had. Judge Judy's gaze flickered to the beige folder on her bench, the same one she'd guarded since the beginning. Derek noticed it too, just for a second, and something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe fear. She saw it, and she smiled. In that moment, it wasn't the smile of a kind judge. It was the calm grin of someone holding a truth powerful enough to burn through every lie in the room. The performance was over. But the real show was just beginning. Judge Judy's gavel struck once, echoing through the courtroom like a warning shot. "Let's move to evidence," she said coolly. Her tone was calm, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. Something was coming. Lena lifted her head, meeting Judy's gaze, and in that silent exchange an unspoken promise passed between them. This time the truth would not be buried. Derek leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the table as if bored. His lawyer shuffled a few papers theatrically, trying to project control. But Judy wasn't watching them. She was waiting for the perfect moment. "Mr. Vance," she began, folding her hands. "You claim that what happened that night was an accident, an unfortunate misunderstanding caused by alcohol and emotion. Correct?" Derek nodded quickly, his voice smooth. "Yes, Your Honor. I deeply regret what happened, but I lost control for just a moment." Stop." Her voice sliced through his sentence like a blade. "A moment, you say?" She reached for the beige folder beside her. The room tensed. The sound of paper sliding from that folder somehow felt louder than any shout. She lifted a document, the courtroom seal stamped across the top. "This," she said, "is the official report from the police investigation. It includes a timeline of your actions, surveillance timestamps, and text message logs recovered from your phone." Derek's lawyer shifted. "Your Honor, those texts were public record," Judy cut in. "And admissible." She glanced down at the page, her voice steady but cold. "Let's read a few." She read the first line aloud. "She embarrassed me in front of everyone. I'll make sure she remembers who she's dealing with." The second, "No one humiliates me. Not her. Not anyone." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Lena looked down, hands trembling in her lap. Derek's jaw tightened. "Those texts were sent in anger," he muttered, voice cracking just slightly. "They don't prove intent." "Oh, but they do," Judy replied sharply. "They prove planning. They prove motive. They prove that what happened wasn't an accident, it was premeditated." She snapped the file shut and nodded to the bailiff. "Bring in the footage." A large monitor flickered to life, and the room fell into uneasy silence. The security camera footage began to play, grainy, black and white, time-stamped just minutes before the attack. It showed Lena locking the restaurant door. Then a shadow moved across the edge of the frame. Derek's shadow. He lingered near the alley entrance, waiting. The footage jumped forward. Lena stepping outside, the sudden confrontation, the blur of motion as he advanced. The rest was chaos. A bottle flashed in the corner of the screen, a struggle, and then Lena collapsing out of frame. By the time the video ended, the room was frozen. You could hear the faint hum of the lights above, the scrape of a pen against a desk, and Lena's unsteady breathing. Judge Judy's expression didn't change. "This," she said quietly, "is what you call a misunderstanding?" Derek's lawyer stood, sweating. "Your Honor, the video is incomplete. We don't see what started the altercation. There could be—" "Don't finish that sentence," Judy snapped. "There could be nothing that justifies what I just watched." She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You didn't lose control, Mr. Vance. You found an opportunity. And you took it." For the first time, Derek's composure cracked. The confident posture, the faint smirk, all gone. His voice faltered. I was drunk. I didn't." "Enough," Judy thundered. "Being drunk doesn't turn a man into a monster. It only reveals the one he already is." The line hit like a thunderclap. A few spectators gasped. Even the court reporter looked up, momentarily stunned. Derek stared down at the table, his knuckles white against the polished wood. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Then, almost softly, Judy spoke again. "We're not done here. There's more to this story. Something you've worked very hard to keep hidden." She placed the beige folder back on her desk, sliding it just out of Derek's view. The red tab still peeked from the side, taunting him. Derek's eyes flickered toward it, a flash of panic crossing his face before he caught himself. Judy noticed. She always noticed. She leaned back in her chair, calm again. "We'll take a short recess," she said, her tone almost casual. "When we return, I'll be presenting new evidence that may change the entire direction of this case." The gavel struck once, and the room erupted into whispers. But as Derek turned to his lawyer, face pale and jaw tight, one thing was clear: Whatever was in that folder, he wasn't ready for it. And Judge Judy knew it. When the recess ended, the air inside the courtroom felt heavier. Derek returned to his seat with his usual arrogance, but a fine tremor in his hands betrayed him. His lawyer adjusted his tie, forced a reassuring smile and whispered, "We're still in control. Trust the process." But that confidence was about to collapse. Judge Judy took her seat, eyes calm but unblinking. "Mr. Vance," she began, "you've had your chance to explain yourself. Now your attorney has requested to make a proposal. Go ahead." Derek's lawyer stood smoothly, his voice low and measured. "Your Honor, my client would like to avoid further trauma for the victim and the court. He's willing to plead guilty to a lesser charge, reckless endangerment, in exchange for 1 year of probation, mandatory counseling, and community service. He has expressed remorse and is ready to begin treatment for anger management and alcohol dependency." He paused, letting the words hang. Then came the real pitch. This agreement ensures closure, accountability, and the opportunity for rehabilitation instead of incarceration. For a moment, Judy didn't react. She simply folded her hands, studying Derek like a hawk watching prey try to act brave. "Probation," she said finally, her tone unreadable. "You think that's justice?" "Your Honor," the lawyer continued, "Mr. Vance is a first-time offender." Judy cut him off sharply. "First-time caught offender, perhaps." A ripple of laughter and shock moved through the audience before Judy's glare silenced it. She turned toward Lena. "Ms. Ortiz," she said softly, "would that bring you peace?" The entire room went still. Cameras tilted toward Lena, her trembling hands clutching her folder. She took a long breath before standing. "Peace?" Her voice cracked. "He left me with 18 scars. I can't sleep without seeing his face. I cross the street when I hear footsteps behind me. I didn't come here for peace, Your Honor. I came here for truth." Her words hit the room like an emotional earthquake. Even Derek flinched. Judge Judy nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." She reached for the beige folder again, the same one that had haunted Derek since day one, and pulled out a stack of papers clipped together. "Funny you mentioned therapy, Mr. Vance," she said. "Because I've read your psychiatric report." Derek's eyes snapped up. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, that report was—" "Court ordered," Judy interrupted, voice like steel. "And deeply enlightening." She began to read. "Subject displays narcissistic personality traits, lack of empathy, and a pattern of manipulative behavior. Repeated instances of aggression in social environments, including 3 prior bar altercations that were dismissed due to lack of evidence." The courtroom gasped again. Derek's jaw clenched, his face draining of color. Judy didn't look up, her voice only grew sharper. "Subject minimizes his actions, externalizes blame, and expresses remorse only when personal consequences are imminent." She dropped the papers on her desk with a thud. "In plain English, Mr. Vance, you're not sorry. You're scared." The line hit him like a physical blow. Derek tried to respond, but no words came out. His lawyer leaned forward, whispering frantically, but Judy raised her hand. "Don't waste your breath," she said. "I've seen your kind before. You cry for yourself, not for your victims." Lena's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from fear. It was relief, the kind that comes from watching the truth finally catch up with its pursuer. Judy leaned back, her tone lowering but every word carrying weight. "You call this a plea deal? You think the world bends for people like you because it always has? Well, not today. Not in my courtroom." The room was silent, hearts pounding. Then Judy looked directly at the camera, her voice calm but loaded with moral fire. "If you think this is where I'll drop the hammer," she said, almost smiling, "hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will shock even this courtroom." Derek swallowed hard. For the first time, the reality of what he was facing began to sink in. He wasn't the one negotiating anymore. He was the one being judged, and for once there was no deal big enough to save him. The courtroom returned from its final break in total silence. No one whispered, no one dared move. Even the camera stopped panning and simply focused on Judge Judy, who now sat completely still, one hand resting on the beige folder that had been haunting Derek Vance all morning. The clock above the bench ticked faintly, every second feeling heavier than the last. "Let's conclude," Judy said at last. Her tone was calm, steady, but that particular calm was the kind that came right before a storm. Derek sat upright, chin high again, trying to appear unshaken. His lawyer had told him to stay composed, to look remorseful but strong. But as Judy opened the folder, every trace of that false confidence began to drain from his face. "Mr. Vance," she began, "I've reviewed every inch of this file, the police reports, the statements, the forensics, even your little therapy notes." She held up a sheet of paper, the official police incident log. "Do you know what this says?" She read aloud. "After the assault, the suspect fled the scene on foot, leaving the victim unconscious. The following day, witnesses retracted their statements after receiving payments from a private account linked to the Vance Family Foundation." A sharp murmur rippled through the courtroom. Derek's lawyer stood instantly. "Objection. Those accusations were never proven." "Sit down," Judy barked, her voice thunderous. "You think I don't know what hush money looks like? I've seen this game played for 30 years, rich men with short tempers and long checkbooks." The lawyer sat down. Derek's jaw clenched, a bead of sweat sliding down his temple. Judy turned toward the monitor at the side of the courtroom. "But you see, this time something survived your money," she said. "Something you thought you destroyed." The lights dimmed slightly as the monitor flickered to life. Everyone leaned forward. The image was shaky, captured from a cell phone. The timestamp matched the night of the attack. In the footage, Lena's voice could be heard shouting, "Leave me alone." The camera swung wildly, catching Derek's outline in the dark alley, his movements aggressive and deliberate. Then a second later, impact. The bottle shattered. The phone's view spun, hitting the pavement. The sound of footsteps followed, retreating fast. Then, faint but clear, Derek's voice, a chilling, drunken laugh. "She'll never talk again." The courtroom gasped as if the air itself had been punched out of the room. Lena's hand flew to her mouth. Reporters' pens froze mid-sentence. Even the bailiff looked stunned. Judge Judy's voice broke the silence like lightning. "That," she said, her words trembling with controlled fury, "is what you call remorse? That's what you want me to believe was an accident?" Derek's lawyer tried to speak again, but she didn't let him. "Save it," she snapped. "You're not negotiating a sentence, Mr. Vance, you're earning it." Her gavel struck once, the sound cracking through the stillness. "I hereby reject this plea agreement. I am recommending the maximum penalty permitted under the law. You will serve a full prison term, pay restitution to Ms. Ortiz for her medical expenses, and issue a public televised apology acknowledging your guilt." Derek's face collapsed. Gone was the smirk, the confidence, the sense of untouchable privilege. He tried to speak, to beg, but the words never formed. His eyes darted toward his father sitting in the back row, the senator's expression pale and defeated. "Bailiff," Judy said firmly, "take him into custody." The metallic clink of handcuffs filled the courtroom. Derek didn't resist, he couldn't. His shoulders sagged, his eyes wet not from guilt, but from humiliation. Lena sat frozen, tears running down her cheeks, watching the man who had once stolen her peace finally lose his own. Judy turned to her, voice softening. "You've been brave, Ms. Ortiz. You stood up when most people would have walked away. That's real courage." The courtroom erupted into applause. Cameras flashed. Journalists whispered quotes, already drafting headlines. But the loudest moment came after the noise, the quiet that followed. Judy leaned back, the faintest glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. She didn't need to say another word. Justice had already spoken for her. Within hours, that final gavel strike would explode online. Millions of views, hashtags like #NoDealsForThePowerful, and clips of Judy's line replayed everywhere. "You're not negotiating your sentence, you're earning it." It wasn't just a verdict. It was a statement. One that reminded an entire nation that, sometimes, justice still roared louder than money. By the next morning, the courtroom footage had already escaped the walls of justice and burst into the bloodstream of the internet. News anchors replayed the clip on every network. Judge Judy slamming her gavel, Derek Vance being led away in cuffs, and Lena Ortiz standing tall with tears streaming down her face. It wasn't just a verdict anymore, it was a statement, one that echoed far beyond that small courtroom. Within 48 hours, the clip had crossed 70 million views across social platforms. The phrase, "justice isn't negotiable," appeared in bold captions on Instagram Reels, TikTok edits, and YouTube Shorts. Reaction videos flooded in, veterans, nurses, mothers, and even law students all saying the same thing, Finally, real justice. One commentator put it best: Judge Judy didn't just deliver a verdict, she delivered a message to every privileged man who thinks a checkbook can erase pain. Lena's story became the heartbeat of that message. Her quiet courage, the trembling voice that refused to say yes to comfort or money, turned her into a symbol for survivors everywhere. Reporters waited outside her apartment, asking for interviews, but she only gave one, standing in front of a women's shelter where she had started volunteering. "If my voice can help one woman speak up sooner than I did," she said, "then what happened to me won't just be a wound, it'll be a warning." The clip of that single sentence spread almost as fast as the verdict itself. Donations to survivor advocacy organizations tripled in a week. Students in law schools began quoting Judge Judy's closing words in essays about privilege and power. Even late-night hosts played the footage, pausing at her line, "You're not negotiating your sentence, you're earning it," and the audience would erupt into applause every time. Senator Vance, Derek's father, tried to distance himself from the scandal, but the damage was permanent. Investigations opened into the Hush Money Foundation accounts, and his son's name became synonymous with arrogance exposed. But it wasn't political fallout that captured hearts, it was moral balance. For once, it felt like the scales had finally tipped toward the right side. Judge Judy, ever direct, refused interviews. Her only comment came through a brief statement released by her clerk: "Justice doesn't bend to influence. It bends toward truth." Those 11 words went viral all over again. They were printed on t-shirts, protest banners, and even pinned above courthouse doors in cities across the country. Protesters carried signs reading, "No deals for the powerful." Teachers shared the clip with their civics classes. Veterans used it in motivational talks. It wasn't just content anymore, it had become culture. And somewhere in the middle of that cultural storm, Lena found peace. Not the fragile kind that comes from forgetting, but the solid kind that comes from reclaiming. She kept a copy of the court transcript framed above her kitchen table, not as a reminder of pain but of survival. When people recognized her on the street, she smiled humbly, never forgetting that the world had watched her stand up when she had every reason to stay silent. The viral storm faded slowly, as they all do, but the words it carried remained. Justice isn't negotiable. No deals for the powerful. In a world where money talks louder than truth, this courtroom had reminded millions that honesty could still roar back. And in that roar, in the clapping, the tears, the headlines, there was a simple truth that everyone could feel but no one needed explained. For once, the system worked. If you believe justice should never be for sale, comment "No deal" below, and subscribe for the next real story where power meets its limit. Because sometimes the loudest sound in the world is the sound of justice finally being heard.